For more on this now, I'm joined on the set by France 24's Doug Herbert. Doug, from a strategic perspective for the Russians, the next 3 weeks of the war are particularly important.
Yeah.
May 9th is coming up. That's Russia's victory day, and Putin really cannot afford to lose.
Yeah, I mean, look, some people are calling Donbas a consolation prize for him. They'll never say this in Russian propaganda, but essentially he failed to capture Kiev. That was his first goal. When that happened, he pushed back the forces, and then they claimed that it was just sort of the prelude to what their real goal is, which is capturing the east, the Donbas. Look, first of all, this is not the beginning of the assault on the Donbas. To be sure, the front line has run through the Donbas for the past 8 years. You know, the emergence of the pro-Russian separatist forces in 2014, and since then they haven't really budged too much. But more importantly, look, Donbas is the industrial heartland of Ukraine, place of, you know, the big coal mines, all the factories, all of that. There's a certain fierce independence in this area. But in the Russian imagination and in the propagandistic, you know, ultra-nationalist imagination of Vladimir Putin and his cohorts in the Kremlin, the Donbas sort of is still what a 1921 Soviet poster called it, the heart of Russia, the beating heart of Russia. And if you want to go back even further in history, this idea of, and we heard about this back in 2014 with the separatists, Novorossiya was this concept of a new Russia, which was beyond the strict borders of Russia, but lands that Russia thought were by rights theirs, their chosen lands, the lands that were rightfully theirs that they had to because they were Slavic brotherhood. What's interesting here is Putin is absolutely fiercely intent on getting Donbas, not just a consolation prize, but you mentioned Victory Day. May 9th is the most patriotic day in the Russian national calendar. It is the victory day of the Nazi surrender in World War II. It is a time when tens of millions of Russians and the columns of the army, everyone's out in the streets, and it's basically a festival of ramped up, virulent, industrial strength patriotism. Putin is, a lot of Western intelligence believe, but it's not going far out on a limb. This is the date that Putin is setting as a sort of deadline, regardless, let's be clear, regardless of what the reality militarily on the ground is on May 9th, when they start celebrating Victory Day on that day, Putin will be proclaiming victory loud and clear, and you will have tens of millions of Russians wildly fired up on propaganda and misplaced sometimes national pride in this war, wildly cheering him on.
Doug, later today, the U.S. President Joe Biden is hosting a video conference with some top allies about Ukraine, the NEM conference, some people might say. Have we reached a limit on what the West can really do to help?
Look, two aspects of this. You know, yes, he's going to be speaking in video conference to the allies, to basically discuss the Ukraine crisis, which is a pretty big sort of, line item on his agenda there, and to better coordinate how to hold Russia accountable. That is, bring justice, the allegations of war crimes and Putin even possibly being a war criminal, according to a lot of the Western leaders, wanting to bring him to justice. How do you do that? Beyond that, have the sanctions reached a limit? We heard Putin yesterday sort of, smugly sitting there giving an economic speech where he said, we're fine. The ruble's stabilized. Everything's fine. We're actually, unemployment's low again. Things are stabilizing. So, hey, West, guess what? Those sanctions you imposed right back at you. You're the ones having the bad employment, the worsening economy right now, the high inflation, the higher prices. You're the ones who are going to suffer the most from all of this. So he's very smug. So the sanctions, unless you do the oil and gas, yeah, they've reached a limit. As for the weapons, we're also seeing limits to that. We're now seeing Ukraine basically begging, saying we need the heavy weaponry. It can't get fighter jets, which it would love to get. It's not going to get that from the West. Will it get tanks? Germany's been balking at some of the heavy weaponry. Some other countries are. And Putin perhaps senses some cracks in the edifice, fissures. Of course, the West, Biden, they will be presenting a picture of unity at Ukraine's time of need. They are all together. They are ready to continue supplying Ukraine with the weapons it needs, with the help it needs, the financial support it needs. But the reality, and perhaps Putin senses that, is that maybe the Western ability to help Ukraine will run thin as more and more the war grinds on. It becomes a war of attrition, and the political will among an already divided Europe, even if that isn't the official line, a divided Europe starts to kick in, and we start to see Ukraine more and more at loose ends when it comes to getting the help it really desperately says it needs from the West.
Doug, thanks for that. France 24's Doug Herbert.